And we have Melissa Kwan, who's joining us today for this session. We couldn't have anyone better. And I'll give you a quick description of Melissa, and I'll also kind of emphasize on why she is absolutely the right person for this track. Melissa Kwan is the co-founder and CEO of eWebinar, which is an automated webinar solutions that saves customer success teams from doing the same webinar over and over again. By combining pre-recorded video with live chat and real-time interactions, eWebinar delivers the perfect webinar every time without you being there. And Melissa has spent over a decade building startups and specializing in large enterprise sales, business development, strategic partnerships, etc. Her last company, Spatio, which is a real estate business SaaS company, was acquired in 2019. And originally, she's from Vancouver, Canada. And Melissa most recently lived in New York, and she's been working remotely and living out at Airbnbs for the past 4 years, which is exciting enough as it is. And now for the best part, right? She's a 3-time bootstrapped founder. That means she's raised very little money, and that too from private investors, no venture at all, which is commendable. And I think, a lot of people can learn a lot from this session just because of your experience in that space. Welcome, Melissa. And we'll go through the Q&A. If you have anything more to say, we'll add that and then go through the interview styled session today.
So you cut off for a little bit there. Was there a question you wanted me to answer?
No. I was just saying that it's great to have you here, and you can let me know when, and we can begin our interview style.
Okay, yeah. Now is great. Thanks so much for having me, and excited to be speaking here.
That's great. Wonderful. So just wanted to check this is the third company that you've kind of bootstrapped, never raised venture. How did you get to kind of get those companies off the ground? What was your thought process? How did it all work?
Yeah, so my first company I started 10 years ago. I was 36, and I just saved a lot of money. Like when I was always working in sales jobs, and I think one of the good things about sales jobs is that you're always paid on commission. I mean, there was like salary and commission. So as a 20-some-year-old, I had saved enough money to kind of get my first company going. The toughest part about that is you never really know how hard a company is and how much it costs until you start running it, because everything is money, and mistakes cost money. So in my first company, what I thought would last me 2 years really lasted me like 6 to 9 months. But I did get a start in that, and we got kind of half a product together. And because I was always very revenue focused, I'm always thinking about growing the company and product in terms of, what are people going to pay for? So that first company transitioned into the second company, which was Spatio. And we got some traction. I know I'm very lucky in this, but I definitely took loans from family, to be able to get started. We had some government funding. So based in Canada, there's a lot of like really great government grants for R&D that helped, propel that as well. But I think, what was really interesting with Spatio was, while it took about 3 years for us to find real product market fit, it got us to profitability within the year, like after we found like what the product that people will pay for. Really, the saving grace for that company was we sold enterprise. So every deal was not $50, right? Every deal was $20,000, $30,000, annual. So every deal got larger and larger, and that was really how we got to profitability. But really, in the beginning, it was just savings, grants, tax breaks, family loans, whatever it took, to get it started. I remember what I did to bridge my first company into my second was, when we had some revenue, I took a loan against that revenue. When you can. And someone once told me, like, you should get a loan from the bank when you can, because no one's going to give it to you when you can't. Like when you think you need a loan and you go apply for it, it's too late. So always make sure you have a line of credit or access to capital when things are good, so that when things are not, you could pull that out. And then eventually we started building on that revenue. And luckily with eWebinar, Spacio was acquired 2 years ago. So I was able to put some of my personal savings in here. We did raise some private capital from friends. And I would have to say that once you have had one exit, it gets much easier to get private investment.
Absolutely. That's super insightful. The takeaway there was accessing capital when you can do it, right? Rather than when you actually need it and you can't. That was great. Also, kind of wanted to get to know more about how does having limited resources force you to think a little differently when you start off building your business?
Well, here's the problem with venture, right? Like venture funding is something that has a trophy attached to it, right? Like I'm of the mind that like I really believe that the media has completely skewed our idea of what success is. Like people think that raising money and getting your name written up in TechCrunch or whatnot, like that's success. But it cannot be farther away from that, right? Like raising venture successfully just means someone was willing to give you money. It does not equal success. It does not equal product market fit. In fact, like in your first couple rounds, like it has nothing to do with your business. You could be someone that's great at raising money. You could have a great pitch. You could be a dreamer, that you could be charismatic and people like that. But the problem with having too much money in your bank account is it delays the desperation that is required for creativity. Like I always say, like desperation breeds creativity, right? Like when you don't need to figure out how to make money to pay your staff, or when you aren't in a position where you have to make a decision between should I do A or should I do B, you're going to do all of those things and you're going to think everything's working because everyone's happy and everyone's getting paid. But when you have very limited resources, it forces you to think, out of these 5 features, what is the one that's going to get me paid? Like, what is the one that's going to get this person to convert and actually sign the contract or, continue after their free trial? When you have such limited resources, it forces you to think in a way that's creative, but it also forces you to think in a way that is revenue generating, right? Like no one, like the most important person that has to give you money is your customer. There is literally no one else that needs to give you money outside of your customer. And if you have customers that are happy, that you're generating value for so much that they would put in their credit card, you have a business that doesn't depend on someone else to give you capital to survive. And that's a really powerful position to be in. And you can choose if you want to, if it is the best thing to do for your company to raise money later. But not having excess capital forces you to think about your product. It forces you to think about who is the best hire on your team. And what is the value that I want to deliver to my customer so that they will give me like revenue. And those are all the things that you're not forced to think if you have if you have access capital.
Absolutely. I think that's beautiful, right? Like the few things that come out, glaringly from here are what are the things that you can actually prioritize, right? Because it all comes down to decision making. And when you do have capital, you can go, you can kind of go all out and say that I want to do all of these. But they may not all be the right decisions to take, and they may not be the right paths to go after. But now you have the ability to prioritize because you're kind of forced to think creatively, innovatively, and take the best foot ahead.
Well, the thing also about having too much capital is you can buy traction. You absolutely can throw a bunch of ads and buy traction and buy users. You get on TechCrunch, 1 million people see it and they're going to sign up and try it a little bit. But it's not sustainable because the moment you cut that off, you're going to lose that so-called traction, right? So when you're paying everybody, you're throwing money at ads, people are signing up, you're not really looking at churn rate, right? Like you're not really looking at why people are complaining. Like when I field right now every single support question. When someone says, do you have this feature? Like we go out of our way to make sure we have it because converting each customer really matters. But if we're throwing money at ads, like I know we can get 1,000 signups every month, but do we have enough to make them stay? right?
Absolutely.
That's what having too much capital doesn't force you to think. And I mean, there's definitely trade-offs. Like there's a lot of bad things as well, shortcomings that come with not having capital. But like, I think in the early days, it's okay to grow slowly because you're building the foundation. Like you're building that machine that can support, you know, the customers that you really want, you know,
Absolutely.
versus like, you know, just throwing a bunch of people at it and think that it's working.
Absolutely. So would you say that it kind of helps you build a better product, you know, if you're kind of bootstrapped and you're working on limited resources? And I have a tied question that's tied to that. You know, if it kind of helps you build a better product, and the second part to the question is, what happens when you require more, you know, more funds to improve your R&D efforts with limited resources? How do you kind of manage that?
Yeah, so I think like when we talk about limited resources, like that word is kind of gray, right? Like you can't have no resources.
Absolutely.
And you know, I mean, we were able to put in about like some of our own savings because like I've had a previous exit. We have some private investors. We don't have any venture, as you mentioned. So we're very lucky to have something to work off of, but you definitely can't have none, right? So I think there's like a threshold, like you need just enough so that you can get it going. Right. And you can optimize on that. I think right now, like talent is everywhere and it's very easy to communicate in any time zone. And there's a lot of productivity tools that help you with that. But I will say that for at least our position, like if you're able to get it off the ground, if you're able to have developers and you're not like literally doing everything, like absolutely, it helps you build a better product. But to your point, like what happens when you're ready to scale this out? Right? Like what happens when you actually need to feed that machine? I would say that there's two ways, right? Like desperation doesn't only just breed creativity in product. It really forces you to think about creative ways of marketing. So how do you get free leads? Right? Like it forces you to think about like, okay, outside of Google ads, which could be, or Facebook ads or whatnot, which could be very quickly a rabbit hole. Right? Like you could throw as much as you want in there. All these companies are made for you to dump money in there. But what ends up happening when you don't have those resources to dump and you start thinking about like, what are the creative marketing and partnership strategies that I can do? Like, where can I get free leads? Like, who can I pull favors from? Like, you have to get so good at that, right? Like, I think as a founder, as a CEO, like you have to get so good at asking for favors. But how do you get there, right? Like I've been doing this for 10 years. Like along the way, you just do a lot of stuff for other people. And you can't ask for things in return. Like you have to offer everything that you can to help someone else succeed first. And then at some point, you have to be unapologetic about asking for favors. Like I have no issues calling up a friend and say, hey, can you blast this out? And I have no issues reminding them. So what happens when you get to that point when you're ready to scale this machine is there's two things. Either you figure out how can I creatively market this with no money, just social currency, which is really the next best thing. Sometimes it's the best thing. Or you say, I'm really ready to scale, so I'm going to go raise more capital. Like I'm not saying that like venture capital or raising capital is bad, but raising it too early and giving away too much before you know exactly what you're selling, that's certainly not a founder friendly thing to do. Because what you realize is once you get on that train, you can't stop. Now you've hired 10 people, you're burning all of it. Now you're thinking about not just growing your business, but how do you impress the next VC and the next one and the next one? And you never get off that train. And then your mind is so consumed in that you're not spending money in your customer. But what you should be doing is obsessing about your customer and building a machine that allows you to build a sustainable business.
Absolutely. That brings me to the next question as to, you know, what are the signs that you can very clearly evident within your company when you can say that, okay, now is the time that I need to go for a venture capital fund, or you know, I can kind of manage looking at it more creatively to build different functions. Like what are some of the signs that you can kind of very clearly tell apart that now I need to kind of go and raise a series of funds?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing you have to ask yourself is, what kind of life do I want to lead? This has nothing to do with your business, right? Like, your business as a founder, your business is such a huge part of your life that I think this is the thing that most founders completely miss, is they think those are two separate things. It's like, this is my life and this is my business. But actually, it's the same thing. So you first have to ask yourself, what is the thing that makes me happy? Like, what is the life that I want to lead? And then you have to create a business that fits that. Because if you are happy every single day, then you're more productive, you're more effective, you're a better leader, you're a better salesperson, like whatever the function is, right? But if you start with, okay, well, I should do these things for my business, and you completely ignore the thing that makes you happy, and then you're doing it the other way around. Then you're trying to fit your life around your business. I personally suffered for almost a decade because I tried to build a life around the business that I had, but it was incongruent. So the luxury that I had with eWebinar was I took some time off and I thought, okay, what was wrong? Like, what went wrong there? And so if the answer is, what's going to make me happy is I want to build this into $1 billion company. I think there's a chance, and I'm going to really feel good about that. And I'm really, and I want to, and I'm willing to sacrifice my life, my time, my relationships, my friendships to build this company. And in order to make that happen, I need to go raise venture money. Then go do it, because that's what makes you happy. But if what makes you happy, in my case, is I want to work remotely. I never want to have any employees. Our entire team is outsourced, except for myself and my co-founder. I don't want any board members. I don't want a boss. I want to call all of my own shots, all of my own hours. I don't want to build this into $1 billion company. If it gets there on its own, that's amazing. I look at what my friends do. I don't have the stamina for that. So
that's a wonderful thought. As a matter of fact, I've also kind of read the blog that you wrote about, what can you do to lead the life that you want? And just so that I can share it with everyone else as well, I'm going to ping it on the chat so that people can go out there and read it. I think it's a beautiful article, and I think it should be kind of spoken about much more.
Yeah. So like if you think, that's the life I want to lead, do not invite a venture capitalist into your company, because all of that will change. Because it's not a personality thing, it's an equation thing. Like, the moment you take venture money, you are a racehorse. So you become that gear in the machine. And if you want to be that, because that gets you high and that's what you live for, you should absolutely do that, because the opposite would make you very sad, right? The opposite would make you very upset. Like, slow growth would make you very sad, right? But I think that's the most important thing. And then outside of the personal part, before you raise venture, you really need to know, can this product generate revenue? Do not raise money to discover an idea. That's just not going to work. You can do that on your own dime, or, have a side job or whatever. But the moment you take venture, you're going to need to optimize for how many rounds you can actually raise. So you have to give up.
Would you say that once you have product market fit and everything is going well, you have a revenue generating model, and now you need to scale and just optimize, right? That's a good time to kind of begin looking at raising venture.
Yeah, I absolutely think you have to know what you're selling. You have to know people are happy. And I think that's it, right? You have to have a product that people are willing to pay for. I'm not talking 10 people. I'm talking at least 100.
Got it.
When you have 10 paying customers, you could be lucky, maybe you've hit a nerve for some people, but when you get to 100 customers that you're not related to, then you have a real product. Then you know exactly what your roadmap is, what you're selling, what people want, what you don't want. So maybe you shed some of that. But more than that, you have to ask yourself, am I ready and willing to invite someone that's not my co-founder to start
Absolutely.
calling the shots in my business and start calling me and making sure I'm making certain decisions, not for me, but for the fund.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a couple of questions. I think it's a good time to start taking a few questions. Why and when did you decide you wanted to bring in outside investment, as you put it, in private capital?
So when did I decide that?
Yeah.
So for eWebinar, we did that on day one, because what we did was I hired a development shop to build the first version of the product. And then I was always going to transfer it to an internal dev team. But I'm not a technical co-founder. I actually thought I could start eWebinar with no co-founder. I later changed my mind about that. Like you can't really have a restaurant without a chef. But I was so sick of managing developers and like a technical co-founder that I'm like, I'm going to do this one with no co-founder. I'm just going to focus on sales because that's what I'm good at. And I'm going to hire a dev shop that's going to be my CTO and be my PM and be my devs. So that first version was going to cost, a few $100,000. And what happened was I put in some of my own capital and I just raised some money from friends to build that first version. So it was actually for a purpose. It wasn't like, let's bring in some money and get it going. And I was always going to build out that first version, see how it does, and then decide, how much money is it going to take to run this thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have another one where someone's asking, does freemium really work? And what's your experience with conversion?
That's a really great question. So in my previous company, Spacio, just for some background, it's a real estate tech SaaS software. So we sold software to real estate agents. We started with a freemium model. Like everybody says, like freemium, get distribution, and then convert a portion. It's going to be great. Everyone who says that has raised venture capital and probably has a massive support team that you do not have. So when you have limited resources, like I did in my previous company as well, the best thing that we did was take away freemium. And I'll tell you why. When you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. That is the universal rule, right?
That's great. Yeah.
The people who don't pay you, they ask for the most. You have to support them. For some reason, they end up being really mean as well. And it distracts you from servicing the customers that actually do pay you. So I would say that unless you have a massive support team or you have a product that requires zero support, freemium is not for you. Because in the beginning, like you need to focus on people that see so much value in your product that they're willing to give you money. And those people are more than willing to give you feedback. They'll stick with your product. They're more willing to live with less features because there's certain things that appeal to them. And they actually pay you. So you are better off having 20 customers that pay you than 200 that don't.
Yeah, they're much more invested in the vision, right? So
yeah, and the people that don't pay you, they're not going to use it. They're not going to give you feedback. Like you're not in fact, that's a good way for you to figure out if you have product market fit or not. Because the moment you turn on the payment switch, like how many people are going to leave? Yeah, and the people that stay, like that's like those are your real customers.
Absolutely. We'll take one quick question since we're all out of time already, but this is really interesting. As a founder dealing with constraints, how did you decide to price your product that's published, and what corners did you cut, if any, on the pricing to scale revenue?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you have to know what your competitors are doing. You do not get too consumed with them, like never compete feature, but you have to know for your kind of a product, what's the price range that people are paying for. So you have to be able to justify the range that you're within. How we made our decision was like, the thing I hated about webinar software was there's always a different package you can upgrade to. And and then you never know if you're paying for a certain thing that will unlock a certain package. Like Zoom is like known for that. Most webinar software priced by seats, like number of users or number of attendees. I absolutely hated that because that limits the growth of your company. Like we want to encourage people to do more webinars, not less. So what we did was we priced by the number of webinars that you publish, unlimited seats, unlimited users, because we wanted people to grow their business with us. And we didn't want them to have any limitations. So we probably fall into like kind of the middle higher price range of similar products, but there are no limitations outside of the number of webinars that you host. And because our mission is to give people's time back, the number of webinars you publish is directly related to how much time you save. So the more you publish, the more time you save, hence the more you pay. And that's kind of how we found that. We haven't really changed our pricing model. But I think that the thing you need to start with is understand what your competitors are priced at. It does not mean you have to price lower than them. It just means you have to be in the same range and be able to justify your pricing when somebody compares.
Absolutely. This is great. This is super insightful. We have a couple of more questions, but unfortunately, we're out of time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to note them down and I'll ping it to you. Maybe we can kind of share your responses with the larger audience later after the event. Would that be all right?
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here, Melissa. This was a wonderful session, and I'm sure everybody got the most out of it. And you guys can tune into the other sessions that we have after this as well. And have a great day.
Cool. Thank you so much.